One of the oddest things about economic life is that the prices for things keeps rising. Incomes and prices in the past were amazingly different from what they are today. In Pride and Prejudice, Mr. Darcy is supposed to have been one of the richest people in Britain. It's 1813 and his income is £10,000 a year. Today, that's less than half of what a primary school teacher straight out of college would earn. In Sense and Sensibility, there's an argument about whether an income of £20 a week is enough to make you well off, and the answer is yes. It's there in living memory too. A cinema ticket was 30p in 1970. Today, it's £13. So why does inflation happen? And should we worry if it does? Governments track inflation obsessively and try to keep it low. There's a vast amount of data collected all the time to ensure that governments can say with amazing precision how the inflation rate is going. Is it on track for 2.3% per annum, or might the increase of 0.38% in February be a cause for alarm? This is, in big historical terms, a relatively new concern. In the 17th century, the Spanish Empire essentially collapsed from inflation without even realizing it was occurring. So, over time, societies have become obsessed with measuring inflation and very focused on managing it. So, why is there inflation? What makes it happen? There are basically three reasons. The first is what economists call cost-push inflation. This is where the costs to businesses rise and are then passed on to customers. There can be a lot of reasons for these rises. Firstly, raw materials, especially oil, might get more expensive for a very nice reason, because a lot of countries are developing and doing well. Secondly, workers might be asking for more money and succeeding either because they've organised themselves well politically or because schools and colleges haven't been training enough workers in the skills that companies need. Thirdly, land rents might be increasing because not enough factories and offices have been built, which tends to come down to political failures around building permits. The result of all this is that businesses then push their extra costs onto the consumer by raising prices. They don't want to, it's a scary move, but they have no choice. They'd go out of business otherwise. The second kind of inflation is called demand inflation. This is when there are increases in the number of people who want something whose supply can't keep up. The most common cause of demand inflation is an otherwise rather nice thing, that people are getting richer and have more money to spend. That's why government can cause inflation by lowering taxes. Everyone loves tax breaks because they raise disposable income, but in the longer term, raising demand can also cause price rises, thereby negating some of the initial boost of the tax break. Similarly, a fall in interest rates may cause short-term pleasure and long-term inflationary pressure. If interest rates on loans or mortgages fall, we might be tempted to take out a loan to buy the new car we've always wanted. But the car company, sensing solid demand, will soon enough jack up the price. If banks and governments inject more cash and credit into the economy, people have more money to spend. But if they're all chasing the same number of goods as before, it just means they can all offer more for the same. This is what happened around housing in the UK, particularly in London. There are broadly the same number of houses there were 25 years ago, but they all cost an absurd amount more. The third classic cause of inflation is governments printing money. There's a deep logic behind this idea, which can at first sound almost criminal. Governments often want to stimulate the economy to create more jobs, so they print more money. This can be done literally by increasing the number of notes in circulation, or they can do it by increasing government debt or by letting banks make bigger loans on the same security. In all these cases, the amount of money in circulation increases. But there's a big problem, because after a while it means the worth of every note starts to fall, because more notes are chasing the same number of things to buy. There's more money about, but it doesn't buy you more, it just pushes up prices. However, there is a possibility here, spotted by the economist and philosopher John Maynard Keynes. It takes time for the value of money to fall, so for a little while there can be more cash around and prices haven't yet risen. This is a window of opportunity that economies can, with a lot of luck, seize. At such Goldilocks moments, people can actually increase their consumption, firms can afford to hire more workers and buy new machinery. And once they've done that, production will increase. There will be more stuff to buy before inflation has eaten up the gain. So there's a real expansion. A bit of inflation can grow the economy. That's a big but contested idea. The argument is that it doesn't matter if prices are going up 10% every year if wages are going up 15%. So deliberate government-led inflation can be a mechanism for growing the economy. But it's a very risky move which has often backfired and been attacked by the great enemies of the Keynesian economists, people we now know as the monetarists, who believe that anything which increases inflation is always going to be an issue and must be avoided at all costs, whatever the short term. So, why is inflation such a problem? The real problem is that not everything inflates at exactly the same rate. If everything went up by 100% a year, and so did everyone's income, and it was all totally steady and predictable, it would be weird, but it wouldn't actually do any harm. The harm comes from the fact that not everything changes at the same rate. In 1941 in Hungary, inflation reached 150,000% each day. A jelly bean that cost 10p on Monday morning would therefore cost the equivalent of £150 on Tuesday morning and £225,000 on Wednesday morning. That's incredibly complicated, but it's a problem only because other things would not be increasing as fast. If you kept your life savings under the mattress, you'd be wiped out in a day or two. The money that could have bought you a house on Monday would get you a jelly bean on Wednesday. This is the ultra-extreme case, but it illustrates a basic point. Inflation is bad for savings. There's no point in putting money aside, and that's a pity, because saving money, the attitude of saving up for things before you buy them, is an admirable characteristic. Keeping inflation low rewards prudence. It helps long-term planning, because you can know what your money will be worth in the future, and this rewards taking care around costs. Ultimately, what inflation reflects is the instability of the world and of life itself. Prices rise because we can't yet keep the complex system known as the economy under control. There's always something going wrong or growing or falling or failing somewhere. Ideally, we'd keep inflation under control with a more or less fixed amount of money chasing a more or less stable amount of goods. But in reality, low inflation is extremely difficult to achieve because so many factors can derail it. Cost of materials, the cost of labour, productivity, taxes falling or rising, exchange rates, again, falling or rising, a growing domestic economy, a neighbouring economy that's growing, falling interest rates, the buying of government bonds, or the printing of money. In the end, we may have to accept that inflation is, a bit like the weather or our own moods, something that's inherently rather unstable, something whose ups and downs we must endure even as we try to mitigate the extremes. Learning to live with inflation belongs to wisdom.